sharing your story and your daughter's story. And I will say I very much agree with you and you too.
Yep.
And if anybody else other than big tech if any other citizen delivered a VHS tape of the murder of your daughter to you and your neighbors, you would have emotional distress and you could recover very significant damages. There is one who's allowed to do what it's doing to you, and that is big tech, because Congress has given them a special subsidy and immunity from consequences of their actions. And I think this hearing has underscored the need for Congress to revisit that.
And I hope you...
As do I. Mr. Prager, YouTube restricting various videos, I guess a total of, I believe it is 56 videos produced by Prager on topics like the Ten Commandments. Another topic, as I understand it, that was restricted was one in which, who was a professor of mine in law school, did a video for you, a historical account of Israel's founding, and as I understand...
Explained nothing. This was the first explanation I heard, the incorporation of murder into the Ten Commandments. With regard to Professor...
I think we would want young people
we would.
hearing thou shalt not murder. That seems like a really good...
It was an argument for the alternative universe that is exactly what young people should hear. God doesn't want you to murder. But so be it. As regards Professor Dershowitz and the video on Israel's founding, we have 320 videos, 15 of them concern Israel, and...
The air inside the United States Senate committee room was suffocatingly tense, heavy with the weight of an invisible war being waged on the American mind. This was not a routine debate about tax policy or foreign treaties. It was an existential reckoning concerning the very foundation of modern democracy. For years, the labyrinthine algorithms of Silicon Valley had operated in the shadows, dictating the flow of information to billions of people worldwide. But on this specific day, the veil of digital secrecy was about to be violently torn away. Senator Ted Cruz, armed with testimonies that would soon send shockwaves across the political landscape, prepared to confront the absolute unbridled power of big tech. The stakes were established immediately with a grim and devastating hypothetical. Addressing a witness named Mr. Parker, Senator Cruz noted that if any ordinary American citizen had delivered a VHS tape containing the murder of an individual's daughter to their neighbors, that citizen would be subjected to a common law tort for the intentional infliction of emotional distress. Under normal circumstances, victims could sue the perpetrator into oblivion and recover very significant damages. Yet, in the modern digital age, there is exactly one group in the United States that is legally permitted to inflict such localized horror without facing a single consequence: big tech. Because Congress had previously granted these massive corporations a special subsidy and total immunity from liability, they were completely shielded from bearing any responsibility for the catastrophic consequences of their actions. This total lack of legal accountability served as the dark, fertile soil from which a much larger and more insidious form of algorithmic manipulation had grown. The focus of the hearing quickly shifted to the overt censorship of ideas, bringing Mr. Prager of Prager University into the spotlight. The digital public square, which was supposed to be the ultimate marketplace of free expression, had secretly morphed into a walled garden guarded by highly biased, invisible gatekeepers. Mr. Prager testified that YouTube, acting as a unilateral arbiter of truth, had restricted a staggering total of 56 educational videos produced by his organization. These were not radical manifestos or dangerous instructions. They were mainstream conservative viewpoints and historical lectures. Among the restricted content was a video simply discussing the Ten Commandments. When pressed for an explanation as to why fundamental religious texts were being suppressed, the absurd justification offered was the incorporation of murder into the Ten Commandments. As Mr. Prager pointed out with incredulity, the core message was that God does not want you to murder, a principle one would assume is exactly what young people should be hearing. The arbitrary censorship grew even more bizarre and politically charged when YouTube restricted a video detailing the historical account of Israel's founding. This particular video was not delivered by a radical pundit, but by the noted liberal scholar and Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, who had actually been a professor to Senator Cruz himself during law school. Out of the 320 videos published by Prager University, 15 concerned the nation of Israel, and fully half of those had been placed on the restricted list at one time or another. This pattern led Mr. Prager to the chilling conclusion that there was clearly a deep-seated loathing of Israel operating within the walls of Google. But the algorithmic suppression extended far beyond international affairs. It struck at the very heart of American history and patriotism. Prager testified that virtually every single video his organization produced that depicted America in a favorable way eventually found itself on the restricted list. He highlighted a video featuring Victor Davis Hanson, a remarkable professor of classics described as one of the calmest-speaking humans imaginable, and the exact opposite of a grenade-throwing speaker. The subject of his restricted video was merely a 5-minute summary of the Korean War. The video sought to educate viewers about the noble sacrifice of the 37,000 Americans who died to keep half of the Korean peninsula free from communist rule. Because this historical reality currently resides in what Prager termed the rubbish bin of history, largely unknown to the modern public, the suppression of this educational content was particularly devastating. The goal of the video was simply to make people proud of America's extraordinary goodness, acknowledging its human flaws while celebrating its immense virtues. Yet Google's algorithms decided the public should not see it. When questioned about the real-world impact of these restrictions, a Google representative casually dismissed the concern, claiming it was no big deal because it only affected 2% of the content. But the reality for creators and viewers is disastrous. Because vast numbers of parents understandably utilize internet filters to protect their families from digital junk, placing a video on the restricted list guarantees it cannot be seen by millions of households. Furthermore, as Prager eloquently argued, this arbitrary labeling serves as a permanent, damaging statement by Google that the university produces videos operating on the exact same moral level as pornography. When creators attempt to appeal these disastrous shadow bans, there is no remedy and no genuine human review. They are simply told their video violated vague community standards. It leaves everyone wondering exactly how a Harvard law professor discussing the founding of Israel violates any legitimate community standard, other than the standard of disagreeing with Google's hidden political agenda. Senator Cruz perfectly encapsulated this dystopian reality by comparing Google to an arrogant Supreme Court, noting they operate under the belief that they are infallible simply because they have the final, unchallengeable word. However, the suppression of conservative and historical videos was merely a precursor to the most terrifying revelation of the hearing. The room grew dead silent as Dr. Robert Epstein took the microphone. Dr. Epstein was not a right-wing activist. He was a highly respected behavioral scientist with nearly 40 years of experience in the field and the former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today. Recognizing the immense gravity of the witness's background, Senator Cruz made it a specific point to clarify Epstein's political leanings on the record. He confirmed that Dr. Epstein was not a Republican, nor was he a conservative. In fact, Epstein stated that labeling him merely not a conservative would be a massive understatement. He had been a very strong, highly public supporter of Hillary Clinton, and he had personally cast his vote for her. He was an academic who believed in the sanctity of democracy and the absolute necessity of free and fair elections, far more than he held allegiance to any specific political candidate or party. And what this lifelong Democrat and Hillary Clinton voter had uncovered through years of rigorous scientific research was nothing short of a digital coup d'etat. Dr. Epstein delivered a bombshell testimony, stating unequivocally that Google's deliberate manipulation of search results had given millions of additional votes to Hillary Clinton during the 2016 presidential election. The technological methods utilized by these tech giants were not traditional campaign strategies. They were invisible, subliminal algorithms that proved to be more powerful in manipulating human behavior than almost any effects Epstein had ever witnessed in his 4 decades of studying behavioral sciences. To demonstrate the terrifying, unchecked power held by these platforms, Epstein referenced a secret experiment conducted by Facebook during the 2010 election. The company utilized 60 million unsuspecting Facebook users in a massive psychological test, sending out a seemingly innocuous "Go Vote" reminder. The results, which Facebook quietly published in 2012, showed that this simple digital nudge caused approximately 360,000 more people to get off their sofas and go vote, people who otherwise would have stayed completely home. Epstein logically deduced that if CEO Mark Zuckerberg simply chose to deploy that exact same "Go Vote" reminder solely to Democratic voters on Election Day, it would instantly grant them an additional 450,000 votes, and it wouldn't cost the billionaire a single dime. The hearing was rapidly approaching a historic crescendo. Senator Cruz, synthesizing the catastrophic implications of Dr. Epstein's research, began to connect the financial dots behind this digital election interference. He asked the room if anyone happened to know who the #1 financial supporter of the Hillary Clinton campaign was in the year 2016. The answer was Alphabet, the massive parent company of Google. Senator Cruz laid out the chilling summary. The #1 financial donor to a major presidential campaign had utilized deceptive search methods to silently move 2.6 million votes in their preferred candidate's direction. He stated that any citizen, regardless of which candidate they favor, should be deeply dismayed that a tiny handful of Silicon Valley billionaires possess the unconstitutional power to silently and deceptively shift vote outcomes without any accountability. It was at this exact pivotal moment that Dr. Epstein interrupted the senator. The tension in the room spiked as the scientist leaned into his microphone. "Again, with respect, I must correct you," Epstein stated firmly. The 2.6 million figure that Senator Cruz found so horrifying was in fact merely a rock-bottom minimum. The actual terrifying reality was that the range of manipulated votes was between 2.6 million and 10.4 million votes, depending entirely on how aggressively Google chose to deploy their hidden techniques. Senator Cruz, a seasoned politician rarely caught off guard, was left visibly stunned. He could only utter a breathless, "Wow," before immediately asking the doctor to repeat the staggering numbers so they would echo perfectly into the congressional record. Dr. Epstein repeated the devastating truth. Between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes were manipulated using sophisticated proprietary tools he had studied for 6.5 years, including the search engine manipulation effect, the search suggestion effect, and the answer bot effect. He warned the Senate that these were not competitive market forces. They were exclusive, highly weaponized tools entirely at Google's disposal, and absolutely no one had the ability to counteract them. Recognizing the profound historical weight of the exchange, Senator Cruz declared to the room and the watching nation that if any headline were to come out of this hearing, that should be it. As the hearing drew to a close, the focus shifted from the transgressions of the past to the terrifying existential threat looming in the immediate future. The manipulation of the 2016 election was not an isolated incident. It was merely a successful beta test. Looking forward to the 2020 election, Dr. Epstein delivered a dire warning. If companies like Google, Facebook, and Twitter all aligned to support the exact same candidate, there were up to 15 million votes on the line that could be shifted effortlessly. This massive, unprecedented manipulation of the American electorate would occur completely without people's knowledge, and most frighteningly, without leaving a single shred of a paper trail for authorities to trace or audit. Senator Cruz highlighted the ultimate, agonizing irony of the modern political landscape. While his Democratic colleagues on the committee frequently bemoaned the pernicious effect of big money and corporate dollars in politics, they were entirely ignoring the fact that a handful of giant corporations and Silicon Valley billionaires were essentially spending billions of dollars in invisible, untraceable in-kind contributions to massively influence the results of elections. The democratic process, the very bedrock of the republic, was no longer in the hands of the voters alone. It was being secretly guided, nudged, and outright hijacked by algorithms operating in a completely black box, characterized by an absolute absence of transparency or accountability whatsoever. The United States Congress had inadvertently birthed digital leviathans, granting them the ultimate power to decide what history the public is allowed to learn, what morals are deemed acceptable, and ultimately, who holds the highest offices in the land. The battle for the future of human freedom was no longer being fought with paper ballots or campaign speeches, but with subterranean search suggestions and invisible lines of code.